Bitcoin is close to becoming worthless.
Let's go. Now, what's the Bitcoin?
Bitcoin's like rat poison.
Yeah. Oh,
The greatest scam in history.
let's get it.
Bitcoin will go to fucking zero.
Yeah.
Alright, you ungovernable misfits. I'm your host, Max. Everybody knows that Bitcoin is useless, worthless, and doomed to fail. But what if everyone's wrong? What if it's the system that is doomed to fail? Join me as I speak to some of the brightest people in the space and slither to the deepest, darkest depths of the Bitcoin rabbit hole. Today's episode of the Meshtadel was with me, Czino, and Dim. I always love chatting to these guys, and I'd also say for anyone who hasn't checked out Dim's art, go and do it now. It's absolutely phenomenal. Some of the stuff he's been coming out with recently absolutely blows my mind. We featured him previously for 21ism. If I remember, I'll put the link in the show notes. But yeah, I love chatting to them, and we covered all sorts of topics around the Meshtadel, growing your own produce, how to help create these networks with other plebs. We talked about mushrooms, talked about bears, we covered all sorts. But actually after the conversation, I sat with Czino, and we'd always sort of allowed the Meshtadel to be something that is organically growing. That was always the plan, is that, you know, this is an idea that was thought up by Solex and his son, Solex Boy. It's a fantastic idea that I just knew had to be built on. We now have our Telegram group, we are doing our spaces live, and I think it's now going to be 2 a month, so I think we're going to do the 12th and the 21st, definitely the 21st. I'll double check on the 12th and we'll put a tweet out about that. But we want people to join the conversation, and we want to help make Bitcoiners more sovereign. We want them to be self-sufficient and strong and smart and be able to protect their families and all the things that are going to be necessary in the coming months and years. So we decided after this call that we'd like to have things a little bit more structured. In the new structure, what we're thinking is to do something starting from yourself and working outwards. You know, there's no point in having all these sats, but then your mental health is not good and your physical health is not good. And then if your mental health and physical health is not good, how are you going to be with your family and friends and your pleb networks, you know? So that's what we're going to try and do. We're going to discuss it in the spaces. Anyone who is listening and thinks they'd like to jump in, they have some ideas, that'd be awesome. We can map it out. And it just means that there's going to be a bit more of a flow to this, and that people can really start following along and we can all improve together. So I'm really excited about that, and I really hope you enjoy this episode. Before we dive in, I just want to say thank you to my new sponsors. We've got Foundation Devices. They are my favourite hardware wallet with the passport. It's open source, it uses QR code scanning, which makes it so easy. You can pair it with Spectre or Sparrow, 2 of my favourite desktops, and it's become my favourite thing to use. I use it all the time now just because it's so simple. If you decide you would like one of these or you want any more information, you can contact me, and if you're going to pull the trigger, if you're going to get one of these sent to you, you can use bit by bit in the checkout and you'll get $10 off your purchase. Next up, we've got Fast Bitcoins. Fast Bitcoins are growing at a rapid rate. I have just done an interview with Danny Brewster, the CEO, and he's awesome. I really enjoyed that chat. He's very open, very honest, and he just says it how it is. He's doing his very best to onboard new Bitcoiners in the most simple, slickest and safest way possible. Go to fastbitcoins.com. And last but not least, we have Casa. Casa are making it so simple for people to use multi-sig. It really is like a 30-minute setup. They can hold your hand the whole way through. I've been running this for about a year, not for all of my sats, but certainly for a proportion. And it gives a little bit of peace of mind. We actually cover it in this episode a little bit. Dim was discussing and thinking about Casa, and I don't think he actually knew that you could have a $10 a month option. I think that a lot of people, when they think of Casa, only think of the more expensive plans. People can dip their toe in, $10 a month so that you sleep soundly at night and you know that your family are going to get your coins if anything happens to you. Being able to sleep soundly at night is very, very valuable. So if you'd like to check out their services, you can go to keys.casa. And if you have any questions for me, as I say, I've been running this for a year, very happy to answer anything. Just reach out, slide in my DMs, jump into the Meshtadel, whatever it is you want to do, you can contact me and I'd be happy to help. Dim, Czino, you there?
I do. Hey guys.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good, but I get when I'm looking at Zencastr, under my name there's a area that says health check and it says warning. It's not a good sign.
Yeah, that's not to do with your audio, that's just in general. You're a danger to society.
Okay, so everything's all right then, no problem.
Yeah, I think everything's good. I quite often get that, so I can see all the sound waves. I think we're cool.
All right. I don't see my sound wave on my end, so as long as you know that it's going to be all right and we're not going to record for an hour without my voice, everything's okay.
No, I think we're good. I can't ever 100% guarantee, but I think we're good. It all looks fine. Nice to have you both on. How are we doing?
I'm
Great.
pretty good. Just a bit tired from all the hard work on my land today.
Any work on the garden or the house, or has it been like fiat mining work?
No. I always take the Fridays off now. Last 2 months of the year, or 3 months. I was working on my water deposit. There was like a heavy rainfall a few months ago, and we had to clean the bottom because it was not properly sealed. So that was quite an adventure, diving down there.
I bet. Dim, are you privy to what Chino's doing with his place, or not?
Well, I was into the know when I think, Zino, you were just starting. That was last year, right? And I'm sure that since you have done a lot of improvements that I'm not aware of, but I'm sure I want to hear about it because Zino, I don't know if you know Max, but Zino is the one who really introduced me properly to the world of permaculture by pointing me into the right direction of picking the right books and giving me a few tips. So I give him a lot of credits for helping me dive down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, I'm
That's
looking
awesome.
looking forward to hear what you gained already in your cultivation. I think like you already a step further than I am because you're already producing fruits and vegetables. I'm not. I'm still working on the ground working, so to speak.
Well, I mean, putting the foundation is so important, man. I mean, once you have them right, it's so much easier. But I would be very guilty and not feel right if I was actually saying I've done it by myself. A lot of the reason why we get so much of harvest is because of my wife. She is the one who has the green thumb, and I'm trying to bring a little bit of my, tinkering in terms of permaculture, but she's just arrives and said, okay, let's do it like this and put the raised bed garden and had the trellises here. And she knows it's like she was born with it,
That's great.
And we ended up having so much food from, we don't have that much of a wide plot of land, but we have, sufficient to plant a few things. And we end up with so much food that we don't know what to do with it. We have to give it away. And even after giving it away, we still have some more growing. I mean, I would have never guessed that just a few plants of tomatoes bring so much and can feed that many people.
Mm-hmm. Have you thought of pickling and what's it called if you peel the tomatoes and put them in jars? It's not pickling, something else.
Preserving.
Preserving is a better word. Yeah.
Yeah, we did that the first year, and then the second year we pickled. It's a lot of work. And I mean, taking care of the garden and is a lot of work on itself. And after that, if you have to do the whole pickling process, etc., it's more work. And so we try to freeze a lot of things, but the thing with tomato is that it's one of those fruits that don't really do well with freezing. So you have to process them in a way before. So it's either by making, as you said, pickling or preserving, or you actually turn them into sauces. But keeping the fruit as is, it's I've looked online. Also, have people who have experimented with freezing processes, different kind of approaches, and nobody was really successful with it. You lose a lot of the flavor, of the texture, etc.
You know what I have seen? The grandparents of my girlfriend, they used to hang the tomatoes and cover them. I think it was sulfur, like to keep the bugs away. And it seemed to have preserved them for a few months.
Oh, really? Oh, that's interesting. So you don't freeze them, you just leave them outside and you hang them?
Yeah, that's what they did in a dry and dark place with the sulfur around, and they lasted. But don't take my word for that. I think it was sulfur. It was yellowish, so didn't know how to ask back then.
Oh, no, that's interesting. I would probably have to find a place outside of the house to just spread sulfur around. But that's something that's interesting to try because, even after giving it, you give it to the neighbors, you give it to people around, then you end up eating whatever you can, and you try to preserve as much as you can. But then, you always have part of the harvest that still you're going to end up tossing, and you feel so bad every time, even if it goes back to the compost, it feels like a waste. So finding ways to keep it and save it without doing too much overhead, it's another quest that we've been trying to achieve. So definitely I'll look into sulfur. What about you, man? So what's the plan with growing? Do you once you're going to start having some ground that is ready, do you have already a plan of action in terms of what you're going to grow?
Not specifically, like probably try everything and see what sticks and what's not. But the problem right now is that we are not living in the house, so we don't think about like doing a big operation in the garden because it's a bit more labor intensive than just being there on the weekend if you can. But this year, at least we want to try some keyhole gardening. It's kind of a raised bed, but in the shape of a keyhole. And the reason why we want to have it raised is because there are rabbits around and we need to fend them off. And we haven't gotten around yet putting a fence that is rabbit proof, if that's even possible, because, they can dig and everything. So maybe raising the bed will help. And then we see what we can grow, some winter vegetables.
Nice. Yeah, raised beds are actually, we have a few and they usually have less critters. The keyhole is actually in one of the books you recommended, which is Gaia's Garden, a fantastic book for anyone who wants to do some permaculture. I highly recommend it. And they talk about the keyhole shape as one of the most efficient way of, in terms of, optimizing real estate. And what they talk about as well is try to do for all the, whether it's rabbits or deers or any animal that would come and eat some of the crops, is to plant deterrent plants around your keyhole so that they, before entering the area with the food, that the plants that are food for you, you put plants that are food for them that are not necessarily food for you, and they will stop there. So they will eat the plants that are in the perimeter, but everything that's inside, they don't need to go because they already find their food outside. I don't know if that really works because I haven't tried, but that's an interesting strategy as well.
Yeah, it's certainly worth a try.
Sorry, Chino, cutting you
No,
off.
yeah, I'm done.
Just a question from me, because you guys are more heavily into the permaculture. I'm just sitting and learning from you both. But the keyhole idea, the keyhole shape, why is it that this is suggested? And when you say keyhole, do you mean like rounded half moon at the top and then slimming down at the bottom, like a traditional sort of keyhole, or what do you mean by that?
You want?
Go ahead, Zeno, since you've been experimenting with that.
Yeah, like as the name says, it's like shaped kind of like a keyhole. So you have a round shape and only one entrance, and then you find yourself in the middle, and you can reach every plant from the center point. And what I'm like, I think there are two kinds of keyholes. Like one is the raised bed kind of keyhole, and then another one is just on the floor. What I'm currently looking is the raised bed one, and there in the center there is even a compost bin in the middle that you just throw in your compost, and if you have ideally some worms, they go in there, they eat the stuff and decompose it, and then they migrate to the outer part and also bring all the nutrients to the plants where they need it.
So when you're talking about a keyhole, you're actually standing in the keyhole so that you can access everything, rather than the plants are just in something that's the shape of a keyhole.
Yeah, like in traditional gardening, it's like mostly you have straight rows of vegetables, and you have to walk a lot, and not to mention about like irrigation. You have to either walk the whole way to irrigate it or lay out the irrigation lines. But in the keyhole shape, you just have either a sprinkler in the middle, or you are the person irrigating. You don't have to move. So that's where it's like very efficient.
Probably saves your back as well if it's raised.
That as well, yes.
And so the other thing that the keyhole brings, it's the minimum amount of space of real estate used for walking. And one of the main principles of permaculture, actually, in terms of design, they try to make the amount of path and walking area to the minimum, because it's space that you cannot use for growing plants, and it's usually more of when you are on the edges. If I understand correctly, I'm far away from being an expert, so Zeno, stop me if I'm wrong. But the areas that are close to the path are the disturbed area. They are the more fragile ones, because they are exposed, and they don't. So you don't have as much of you have a lot of interaction happening. So they try to limit the amount of spaces for path, which is terrible for me, because one of the things I really love to do is making path everywhere in the property, but that's the way it is. You have to give more room to the land so that it's left alone and not disturb it.
By the way, Tim, okay, we kind of already went way past the introduction in the beginning, but I wanted to ask you, how are you doing? Like, since your accidents, have you fully recovered?
Oh, well, mostly, yeah. Thanks for asking. It's been quite an experience, and honestly, just to put Max, I don't know if you
I was going to ask in a minute with the chainsaw, right?
Well, a chainsaw was involved, but fortunately for me, it's not the reason of the accident. Although the real culprit is not necessarily any better, it's the tree I was cutting. So there was a storm, and a tree fell on the driveway, and it was not a small tree; it was a major maple tree. So pretty big tree. And I was cutting it down with one of the neighbors who very kindly helped me out. And we were 90% done. And of course, it's really the last 10% that was the most difficult in whatever you achieve. And surely enough, his chainsaw got stuck in the trunk. My chainsaw got stuck in the trunk, and we were trying to wiggle the tree, whatever was left, the trunk, to free the chainsaws. And mind you, the tree had fallen, but it was kind of in equilibrium on the driveway where the rocks are, and there was this, it was a fork with two parts. So we were in the middle trying to move that tree so that chainsaw would get free. And sure enough, the tree started rolling on itself, and the second part of the trunk hit my head, made me fall on the rocks. We had like these big rocks next to the driveway, and fell back on my head. So basically my head got crushed between a rock and a tree, a rock and a hard place. And literally I heard a crack in my skull. I started having blood flowing from my ears, my nose, my eyes, everywhere. And honestly, I really thought that was it. I was dying, and I would crushed on the side of the driveway. Big drama, my wife arrived, the neighbors started calling the police, the firemen came, helicopter, everything, the whole shebang. And then they took me to the hospital, and I thought, okay, that was it. And the first thing that I thought about, and actually the only thing I thought about, is, my God, how is my wife and my family is going to get a hold of my Bitcoin? How did I really make them clear enough? Is that going to be possible? And I was so worried, that I would not be able to be there for them to help them out. And I mean, that's where those moments where you really see what matters, and what matters was the family. Nothing else was important, Family and Bitcoin. So, two things that are really important in life. It's based.
That fear of thinking, well, what if they can't access it? I can't imagine what that's like, and I can't imagine what it's like to feel how you did, but fully recover now. And also, did you reassess your storage and make sure now that you wouldn't be concerned if you got hit by a bus, that actually that they can access it?
Yes. So there are, I'm much better, thank you. After more than 6 weeks of nearly eating liquids, I'm better. I have a brand new jaw that's made out of titanium, so now I can star in a James Bond movie. So that's great. I haven't seen the last one, but I hope jaws come back. And then apart from that, I mean, I still have bruises and cuts and things here and there, but honestly, it could have been so much worse than that. And from now on, I leave the tree cutting to the professionals. That's really the lesson I've learned. And the other lesson I've learned is how to deal with that kind of problem in terms of storage and retrieving Bitcoins for the loved ones. If anything happens, what's the strategy? And people are using things like Kazaa, which is, I'm sure, a great strategy. But I was trying to see what's the deal when you don't want to have a third party, when you want to remain as lean as possible. And so I've kind of thought about a way to send basically pieces of the passphrase, the keys, to people, and everybody has a piece of the passphrase. And so let's say you have a wheel with 10 people, and out of the 10 people, you send each of those people an envelope with a word, one of the 12 words. 12, or if it's 20 words, you put more, but a fraction of those passphrases for each of the person in a sealed envelope. And you say, if anything happens to me, you send the envelopes, you give the envelopes to whoever the name is on, and those people will also give you an envelope for you. So basically, it plays as a collection system for people to retrieve their passphrase, and they cannot have it before. And then if you decide to change your will, you just resend a fresh batch of passwords. So it's very paper oriented. It's very old fashioned, but I like that approach because it doesn't rely on any tech, and it's easy for anyone, even people who are not ready yet, to retrieve or to be in the know in terms of what they have to do technically. So you could even have that system for a 10-year-old, and that would work. So
just as long as you trust properly the people that you're giving these words to, that they won't collude or that they won't lose them. I guess if you have that trust, if it's people you really trust, then it works.
Yeah, but if you think about it, the same goes if you give them actually the full keys. They still have to be careful with it and not lose it, and they have to do their own due diligence in terms of how to store properly the bitcoins. So all those problems exist no matter what, and I think the trust level also goes as a group. So that's an interesting dynamic. So if you have people that and you have family members and you all care for them and you hope that they interact well enough with each other so that you kind of try to inoculate a level of intertrust with people. And if they want to retrieve something, they have to trust each other. And that's also something important for you as if you have people that you love, you want to make sure that they love each other as well, enough so that they can share this type of information. So it's not without flaws, for sure. And it's a system that needs probably improvement over time. But that's what I have so far. And if you guys have another strategy or something you want to share, I would love to hear it, because it's a problem that everybody will face no matter what.
Yeah. For me, I haven't felt the need yet to think about this stuff. Like, I know one person who is in full knowledge how to retrieve those bitcoins, my significant other, but apart from that, nobody else. And I think that is still running dangerous. Like, if something happens to both of us, then those bitcoins will be a donation to the rest of the world. But of course, like, God forbid, I don't want to think about that. But yeah, maybe things will change as soon as we're gonna have kids.
Yeah, I think that's a big one, isn't it? And there's a lot to be said for like multi-sig and things like Casa or Gray. Also, just doing it yourself if you were technically capable, and using something like Seed Signer or something like that. But I think everyone has a sort of level of comfort, and you just progress and you constantly iterate and change. And what's most important is that you sleep well at night, and that you know that there's a high probability that if anything happens to you, that your loved ones get it. And sometimes overcomplicating it then stresses you out more. If you do something you don't fully understand, like me with multi-sig, I haven't gone down that path yet, because I'm just like, I don't feel completely comfortable with it. So I'm sticking to what I'm currently doing, even though what I'm currently doing is not technically as good. So it's a personal thing, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's also that some of those systems, I haven't checked really Casa in a while, but I know that it makes sense if you have quite an amount of Bitcoin. But if you have really small amounts, using something like that, the cost of running it monthly is too high for being meaningful. But I guess at the same time, if you don't have a huge amount, you don't really need those systems, because if you lose it, it's not really important. So yeah.
The 2 of 3 with Casa, I actually use it for a percentage of mine for that exact reason. And I think it's $10 a month, which is not...
Really?
Yeah, for the gold one. So you can spend like $5,000 or whatever it is for the full concierge service, and 3 of 5, and like someone that you can call any day of the week, and all that kind of side of things. But if you just want like a basic 2 of 3 multi-sig, I paid $10 a month, and I paid it in Bitcoin. And you don't also have to register your details. So like when I set mine up, I just did it with a undoxed email, like a brand new email, put everything through Whirlpool before I sent it there. So technically there's very little traceability, and then just have a proportion there so that if anything happens to me, then my loved ones can get hold of it. So it's sort of like a middle ground. But of course you can do it for free. It's just, do you have the time and
the understanding?
Exactly, and I don't have the time or the understanding right now. It's something I'd like to do, but it's definitely something worth considering, I think.
Yeah. You know what I think the world needs, and I think it will happen once we're in a Bitcoinized world, is a movie about exactly this situation. Like somebody in the family dies and everybody receives a letter, a mysterious letter, like with parts of the passphrase, and then the family has to come together and figure this out. And you see like all the drama happening. And of course, happy ending, the family, like they learn how to trust each other and they unlock the Bitcoin.
Actually, it's funny. Can you imagine all the movies that are going to come out about Bitcoin?
A lot.
A lot.
as long as they actually like mirror reality, because right now I feel like if a movie touches the topic of Bitcoin, it's mostly ridiculous, like the mainstream narrative of what Bitcoin is perceived as.
Yeah.
And I'm waiting for a movie that actually makes sense from a Bitcoiner perspective.
Yeah, because they're going to say like, oh, it's a load of drug dealers and bad guys, and we're doing all this shady, shadowy supercoder stuff.
Or get rich quick or stuff
Exactly.
like this.
Yeah.
And actually, we're sat here talking about tomatoes and and how much we love our family and wholesome things like that. So it's not exactly on point the way they're portraying us.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
it
it's
was
coming.
that time. We're still early.
Very. Yeah, I think very, very early. And the reason we've started this show is, you can talk about Bitcoin all day, every day, and you can get to a point where you understand that this is the best money ever and that the value will continue to increase and it's better on all the fronts that we know. But what's most important is the family and your loved ones and making sure that people are eating well and they're healthy and you have good relationships with people and you have the time to spend with them. And that's kind of the point with this show, is that it's kind of moving onwards and upwards, because now you have that kind of safety net. You have that in the back of your head thinking, well, my purchasing power should increase and I have more freedom than I would without this. So where can I spend my time to improve other aspects of my life and the lives of my friends and family? And that's what's really exciting me at the moment.
I really noticed what you just said. I really noticed it yesterday when we had the Twitter spaces. I think it was full of Bitcoiners, but we did not really talk about Bitcoin at all. It was very fascinating to see. Like, I think at some point when you figured it out, okay, Bitcoin is here to stay and it's going to be the base, the foundation of a new world we're going to usher in. Now we're actually talking about things that matter, like how to get to this new world. Like, we figured out the money and now we have to figure out everything else as well.
Yeah, how does it bleed to the other topics? And going back to what we were talking about earlier, I mean, I always seen permaculture and Bitcoin part of the same philosophy. And interestingly enough, it seems like it's the case for many people. Why do you think it is? What do you think the correlation between Bitcoin and permaculture is so obvious?
I think in its core is the low time preference. Like, the fiat culture is like you want things now, and basically in agriculture it means strip mining what you have right now, which means of course that the soils are being depleted. And Bitcoin and permaculture have this very much in common. This is how I actually started realizing those parallels. And based on that, figuring out, oh shit, it's actually also about energy. Bitcoin is an energy currency. And in permaculture, you try to like increase the energy flow that you have on your land or in your operation at the same time. So once you start going down, you see more and more of those parallels. And it is surprising to me still that like Bitcoiners, for them, it's easier to discover permaculture because they see how well it aligns. But from the other way, like from permaculture to Bitcoin, seems like a barrier. Like they don't see the full picture yet.
Mm-hmm.
Have you tried orange pilling many permaculture people? Like, is there anything that they align with and that twigs, or are they just completely like a normal no coiner?
Well, I mostly only know permaculturists through Bitcoin. Like we have this Telegram group with Bitcoin and permaculture. This is how I know actually almost everybody in permaculture, except for a few individuals. But I know, like through reading through forums, like for example, Paul Wheaton, he is fond of Bitcoin because somebody used to give him some many years ago, and there was a forum in his forum a thread about Bitcoin and energy, and he was defending Bitcoin. So he sees value in that, although he's not openly admitting that he like uses or holds Bitcoin.
Yeah, I wonder why that is. I suppose it's probably that it's just such a complex topic, and because it's multidisciplinary, like you have to be a certain type of person to spend the time to get into it, and it maybe doesn't seem obvious to everybody, whereas like I can understand the allure for anybody to be interested in permaculture, because who wouldn't want to make the most of their land and have high quality nutritionally dense food for their families? Like that surely should be the starting point. Arguably, it's the most important thing is the energy source that we put into our own bodies. So it almost should come first.
That's true.
Also, like coming back to the question why permaculture people are less into Bitcoin, there's also like this separation, like Nanya also explained already about the purple breathers. And I went also a bit deeper into this, and there's really like the distinction between those that are more esoterically inclined towards permaculture, and then there are the others that are more capitalistic or materialistic. Like they use permaculture like because it's efficient, because it makes sense. And then there are the others who are more into like this idea of fair share and giving back to the people. And I think just by looking into those two categories, you can see which group is more likely to discover Bitcoin and which one is less. And I remember there were also some talks about, like, of course, cryptocurrency, but more the idea of an altcoin that is like distributed in a fair manner. And of course, now recent example is this WorldCoin thing. what the fuck? Like, why do we even pay attention to this? Because only the guy who comes up with it is from OpenAI, and now it seems like, oh yeah, this is the new thing, and then you realize, fuck, you have to scan your iris and basically give up your biometric data. Oh my god! Like,
I'm glad you're saying this. Like, for a split second, I thought you were about to shill us WorldCoin.
no, absolutely not. Like, absolutely against it. Like, seriously. Oh, it's fairly distributed, but what do you give up? Like, basically your biological identity. Great.
Yeah, and I thought ICOs were dead, but okay. Well, people are still coming up with wannabe Bitcoin competitors in 2021. It's amazing that it's still happening. I'm really I'm completely shocked that we have not moved on from that way of thinking yet.
It's easy pickings. It's just so easy, isn't it? Get some good marketing, get some hype, sell something that people have little understanding of. Yeah, people just will continue. I can't imagine that this stops probably ever. I think people are always going to fall for this kind of stuff.
Scammers will scam.
Yeah, you're always going to, because someone can paint this beautiful picture of how something's going to be, and we want to believe it, so we fall for it. And it's a lot easier to just jump on something like that than take the time to understand what is money and why should I care. You know, it's a slow and tedious process to go through that, and people just aren't interested, can't be bothered, and they do what they do. That's why it will persist.
But to go back for a second to the correlation between permaculture and Bitcoin, I think there's one more thing I would like to add is, do you see also the correlation, because there is in both of them there's this strong sense of independence. In Bitcoin, obviously, there's this whole, meaning of freedom and how we feel and why we approach Bitcoin. But if you look at the reason why permaculture, because it's giving independence to nature. You respect nature and you give them, you understand that by leaving them alone, plants can do wonders. You don't need to influence them that much. You just go with the flow and you listen to nature, you look at how it functions, and you just try to communicate with it. And if you see that a plant needs something, you just help them out, but you don't try to force your way. And there's a strong sense of respect of freedom and independence.
That's a great point.
And it's interestingly enough, if you look at the work of the transcendentalists and their philosophy, so we're talking about Emerson, Thoreau, that's their philosophy. They were strong believers of individualism, of independence. They were rejecting the system. Basically, they were rejecting the centralized authority, and they had this huge respect for nature. So you have a lot of the points of the transcendentalists that you're finding today in Bitcoiners. I found that correlation really interesting.
Yeah, that's such a good point. It's like the Austrian economics way of doing things, of like, let the free market decide, leave things alone, don't interfere, versus Keynesianism, like people just interfering, thinking they're smart enough to fuck around with a complex system, and nature's too complex, and we've proven that because look at the problems we've got. That's a massive point. And also, like, in terms of freedom, the idea of having your own produce that you have on your land means that no matter how crazy the world gets, if you're not allowed into a supermarket because of some fucking stupid policy, then, well, you can go out to your garden and you can still feed yourself. And that just helps you sleep better at night, I imagine. Like, it's a powerful thing. And you're taking responsibility for it, which is another key thing that I see in Bitcoiners. Is like, you very rarely see Bitcoiners make excuses or put blame on others. Most of them will take it on the chin and say, yep, that's my fault, it's my responsibility, I must do better. And if you don't actually produce anything in your garden, there's an issue, then it's like, right, well, there's something I'm doing wrong here, let me fix it, rather than blame supply chains or anything like that.
Yeah, it's a great way to practice self-responsibility.
Dim, this mighty blue oyster I saw a picture of on your Twitter. Mushrooms, are you growing many of them? Is it just mushrooms and tomatoes? Or, like, can you talk me through a little bit through your garden and, like, what have you got?
Sure. Well, after what I just said about not interfering with nature, you're going to be disappointed. So mushrooms is a little separate. So the garden itself, we have this year, we had, like I just said, tons of tomatoes, a plethora of hot peppers, of jalapenos. We had potatoes, acorns, squashes, cucumbers, and blueberries, tons of different herbs. So that's been the group for this year. And in addition to that, I was actually, my father, unfortunately, was sick with cancer, and I had been looking at a lot of alternative medicines, and I stumbled upon this talk with this guy named Paul Stamets.
Oh, he's fucking amazing, that guy.
Oh, he's incredible. And there was a show on Netflix as well about mushrooms. He's in it. He's the one being the main guy being interviewed. Anyway, he's been since the 70s into the mushroom rabbit hole. He became some kind of an expert in the field. And he knows pretty much everything about it. And so I got his book. And then in his book, he talks about the fact that it helped his mother, who was sick with breast cancer, and she was actually left as not given any chance of survival by the doctors, but he ended up like feeding her a daily dose of what's the name of that mushroom? I forgot the name, but basically,
Lion's mane?
no, not lion's mane. It's another one that has a lot of medicinal properties, and she was fed on a daily basis, and she survived the cancer where all the other members of our study group were didn't. So I don't know how much he emphasized, and he adds, maybe he embellishes the story a little bit. But no matter what, that made me go into that direction and want to learn more. And I ended up getting my little rig, my little station for growing mushrooms. And I got into a bit of a rabbit hole there and started like wanting to grow some gourmet mushrooms. And so I ended up growing blue oysters and lion's mane, which it has a lot of medicinal property as well. I think it helps with memory, and it helps your nerves grow back. So people say that it helps treating dementia as well. So I don't know about all of this. You always hear a lot of things about the wonderful properties of things. Suddenly, pot has all the properties in the world. I think it's great, but I don't know if it cures everything. So I'm sure there is a lot of excess in what people say, but at the same time, it's a world that we don't know much about, and there's a lot to explore. So I'm sure if you put your needle in the middle of the spectrum, you will find some happy medium, and I'm sure there's a lot of good things about mushrooms. So I wanted to dive in a little bit more into it, and I grew those two. And when I say it's not really letting nature do its job, well, I have in my garage a setup where I have a tent, and I go indoors, and I buy these big bags of mushrooms of grain that is already inoculated with mushrooms, and then with that I get some sawdust from the local mill in exchange of mushrooms, actually, and then I mix it with water and some nutrients, and then you sterilize. You make those bags of 10 to 5 pounds, and you sterilize them in a huge sterilizer. And once they're sterilized, you inoculate them with some spawn, what they call spawn, which is the grain already inoculated with the mushroom, the mycelium. And then you wait for about 10 days, and magically those bags start becoming all white because the mycelium is just eating its way through the bag. And after the 10 to 14 days, you just cut open the bag and you put them in an area, in a room which has a lot of humidity and some sunlight. And after another 10 days, you get those beautiful mushrooms.
When you say like somewhere that has a lot or like a reasonable amount of light and humidity, would something like a greenhouse or a conservatory work for something like this?
Yeah, so what I have in the garage is a greenhouse. Basically, you have the three conditions. You have the humidity, the temperature, and the light. And actually, there's a fourth condition, which is the most important. I think it's the fact that everything has to be sterilized. So you have a sterilization level, but I put it separately because it's not the elements of nature. So once you have a very high humidity that is somewhat controlled, that you have some indirect sunlight, and that your temperature is not crazy cold and not deadly hot, you can grow mushrooms. So and it's not that much work once you have done the sterilization process. Really, the sterilization is really the most painful because it requires some heavy duty equipment, and you have to really set up some kind of laboratory setup where you have a HEPA filter, where you have gloves, where you feel like you're entering an hospital that is coronavirus psychopath area, but once you have that in place and you have your bag sterilized, then it's fairly easy.
I used to grow a very special kind of mushroom, so I know a bit about that. And what I did, I just built a little cardboard box with some plexiglass on top so I can see what is inside. And then on the both sides, some holes where I can put in my hands into gloves. And everything inside was already pre-sterilized. So whatever I'm doing there is in a sterile environment. And yeah, I can definitely second it. Like sterilization is very important because once it gets contaminated with some other fungi, they can quickly overcome it. Of course, it depends on the kind of mushroom you're growing, but instead of white, it can turn green and then it's bad.
Yeah, it's actually, when it turns green, interestingly enough, you're actually making penicillin. The thing about mushrooms or mycelium, it will get killed by any other form of mold or fungi. They are kind of weak compared to other ones. So other mold will be very aggressive. So if you create an environment that is full of nutrients and you inoculate the mycelium in it, chances are, if it's not sterilized, some other organism will be more aggressive than the mycelium. And we end up colonizing the whole thing, and your mycelium will be killed. So that's why it's very important. But once it has kind of taken over, then, it's a healthy mycelium. It can produce fruits, and the fruits are the mushrooms.
And when you're sterilizing this, are you sterilizing with some form of chemical or heat, or like, what's that process like for somebody who maybe is listening to this and considering, oh, maybe I'll give this a go? Like, what's that process look like?
So I have this heavy-duty pressure cooker.
Yeah, I did the same process. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way to go. You're what they call autoclaves. So it's depending on the size of your operation, it can range from a few pounds to tens of hundreds of pounds that you can do in one blow. But basically, if you really want to run a mushroom business, you need a lot of space in terms of your sterilizer to run a lot of volume. But so basically, it's a pressure cooker that can run at least 20 to 25 psi of pressure. And because some of those molds, they will survive just boiling water. It's not high enough. Boiling water, it's the 100 degrees Celsius boiling point. And some of those organisms will survive that. So you need to have temperature a little higher. And by doing pressure cooking, you actually can achieve a higher temperature. And so that's what it does, basically. And you have to run it for a few hours and then leave it cool off overnight. So it's basically a 24 hours process. And the tricky part is once you have sterilized, between the time you're opening up your sterilizer and you move it to a sterilized environment, which has basically fans that with HEPA filters that pushes the air, and then you have gloves and you have cleaned everything, then you have a risk of contamination. So all of these processes have to be very, very meticulous, and you cannot, just fuck around. Otherwise, the first batch I've done, I was not as rigorous with my setup, and I ended up losing half of the bags I've made to penicillin, or actually there was a few that were black mold. I don't know what it was, but once it's in there, you just have to throw everything away. The nice part, though, just to finish on that, is that whatever you throw away, you can compost it. So all those bags are made once they kind of have a lifespan. So you can do what they call flushes. A flushes is you let the mushroom grow, then you cut it, and then you let it grow again. So you can do up to 3 flushes before it's not that interesting to keep those bags. And then you can recycle those bags to the compost, and they will hopefully maybe bring more mushrooms in your compost. Who knows?
But yeah, like if you get those flushes, it's amazing how much grows. Because, oh my God, like I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw that. The first flush is just incredible.
Yeah, it's so rewarding, man, right? And then, you don't believe you made it yourself, but you did.
Yes.
So in the end, my regimen at home, my diet has changed to a lot of mushrooms, a lot of tomatoes, a lot of peppers, and that's it. And we're very happy about it.
That's so nice to have something that you produced yourself. Like you can take pride in it and you know where it's come from, you know how it's been made. I've done it on a very small scale, not with mushrooms, but with other produce, and it somehow tastes better. I don't know why. Maybe it's just in my head, but I think maybe it's just like a pride thing and knowing where it's come from. But it definitely feels better to be eating that than just something you've bought in the supermarket.
No, but it does taste better because look, when you get a produce in the supermarket, first of all, if you think about vegetables, most of the supermarket they have these rules and regulation that when they buy vegetables, the vegetables have to be a certain size, a certain color, a certain shape, and I mean I've seen those some of those charts. There were, I think, for bananas or cucumbers, I forgot. It goes to the point that they're measuring the curve angle of the produce. And if it's not respecting a certain chart, then they don't buy it. So what do you think those producers, they do? They have to alter the way they produce. They have to use some kind of agents to make those vegetables look a certain way, feel a certain way, be of a certain kind. And of course, it's going to affect the flavor and the taste and everything. And then it's not only that, but then, you don't know how long your produce has been on the shelf. And they always try to push the older ones first. And I mean, there are a lot of tricks that supermarkets will do so that your produce for sure is not going to taste the same. My only recommendation is if you cannot produce your own vegetables or whatever it is, even animals, your own meat, just try to buy it from local producer, from small shops that the farms around you, I'm sure they have their own products and they sell it, and you can actually get better products for sometimes a better deal. What we do, we find a farm around us that has lambs, and we buy lamb meat from a local farmer. We have established a relationship with them because every year we get half a lamb. We freeze it, we put it downstairs. We eat a lot of lamb. I don't know how healthy is that for us, but we love it. The meat tastes great, and that's fantastic, man. We know where our product comes from. We know where our meat comes from. We met the lamb. I mean, how can it be better than that, And it tastes delicious.
Do you ever trade produce? Like, you said you have excess tomatoes that you're giving to all your neighbors and friends. Have you ever sort of traded for either meat or something else you're not growing?
I've traded the mushrooms so like I said, I'm using the sawdust is what you use, the substrate for growing the mushrooms, the base material. And in exchange for the sawdust, instead of paying for it, I give mushrooms back. So that's the first one. Eventually, I would like to turn that into a small scale operation where I can sell it to restaurants around in exchange of a nice meal. That's they cook my mushrooms and I get something interesting in return. But apart from that, we really haven't done any commercial trade. No.
What about you, Czino? If you get set up and you start growing, have you got plans to do something like that?
Yeah, it's like the first recommendation to like establish kind of like a local Meshtadel, like it's a common theme, like in our talks before, like knowing your local butcher or knowing your local farmer is definitely recommended. And I haven't looked into it yet, but once I start producing, I definitely want to get to know some other people and hopefully establish some kind of trade that is not using currency, because like especially like if you sell or buy every time there is a tax implied. Mm-hmm. But how can you tax something if you trade mushrooms for substrate, for example? You cannot put a number in this. It's impossible to tax.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's true. But that's where, the number is not really a number. It's the level of comfort between people. That's the better principle is this, You are happy with what I give you and I'm happy with what you're giving me. And that's it, There is no need for anything extra.
Exactly.
Yeah. What about you, Max?
What about me growing anything?
Yeah.
When I had my house, which I recently sold for sats, I did have a garden with, I think we had 6 vegetable patches. I built them out of railway sleepers. So I think they were like 8 foot by 4 foot each one, and it was 3 sleepers up. And then I had like copper tape around the top because I was told that that was going to be helpful against the slugs, which was wrong. It didn't help at all. I grew beetroot. I had a lot of different herbs and bits and pieces. I had lettuce, but that all got eaten. I had some green beans. What else did I grow in there? I actually grew like mainly beetroots. I got really obsessed with beetroots, and they were like one of the only things that weren't getting eaten. And then like mint for like pims in the summer and stuff like that, and a few bits like that. I mean, it certainly wasn't enough for me to feed even just myself, really, but it was a lot of fun. And I used actually mushroom compost, which seemed to be amazing for growing everything. I had 2 tons of it delivered to the front of the house, which I then had to take out by hand down a little side alley and then fill the things. It took me about 2 weeks to build everything and get everything set up. But yeah, it was enjoyable, but I'd like to do something bigger scale in the future. I'd like to give it another go. Right now, though, I'm in a flat and I'm afraid to say, going to the supermarket and plastic-covered nonsense at the moment.
Well, if you ever happen to have to deal with slugs again in your future, I have a trick for you.
Go on, what's the trick?
You feed them beer.
Oh, I tried this. Yes, they enjoyed it very much, but they still kept coming. It's exactly what I did. So I had the copper on the top, and then I had on each corner a thing with beer, like a little glass with beer, and it would always be full of slugs, but they still decided to eat everything. So what they did is they went across gravel, about 6-7 foot of gravel, then up 3 railway sleepers, had the beer, and then the rest of them then carried on and ate all of my lettuce. But I was basically like not far at all from water, so I think I had more slugs and snails maybe than most people would. But yeah, they destroyed everything.
Oh, you had some determined slugs, and definitely you are in the New York City of slugs for sure.
Yeah, it was. Someone said to me as well, ducks yesterday.
Yeah, exactly. There is a common saying in permaculture is you don't have a slug problem, you have a duck deficiency problem.
I like that.
Well, so once once you're all set up, I hope we'll be able to come and meet you in person.
Yeah, would love that.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Are you building an open Meshtadel?
What do you mean by open?
I mean, it's open to everyone to come by.
Oh yeah, of course. Like if you're visitors and you're invited guests, yes, of course.
That's great.
There won't be walls, by the way. Trying more to blend into the environment.
I think that's the smart way, isn't it? Blend in and work together with other plebs. That's the way forward.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But there's this one thing we already talked about this privately, Max. I was looking into who can install some solar panels for me, or the whole solar system, to be precise. And I found that I have this hurdle to overcome trusting other Bitcoiners, because if I announce myself as a Bitcoiner, there is, of course, the risk if somebody else understands Bitcoin, like I might put myself like into a risk, like putting a target on my back. So this is something we might also want to discuss, like how to build a Meshtadel, like this chain of trust, because all I might have needed, like I was talking to some Bitcoiners, but they were so random, like there was no relationship, not even through 2 corners, like 2 other people. So I just couldn't find myself trusting them. I didn't want to meet them or disclose my location.
It's a good point. It's a difficult thing to fix that, though. Mm-hmm. Other than, I think when we spoke about it, all we sort of came up with is, well, have someone who is one hop away from someone you trust, and then there's some accountability on them. So like, for example, like if you said to me, oh, do you know someone, and then I suggest someone and they rob you, then it's bad on me, and I'd only send someone to you that I fully trust myself. But other than that, I think it's really difficult problems to solve.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this one hop is all that was needed to be able to trust somebody. Like completely random plebs, no, sorry. I need at least some common link that I can refer to.
You have to be within the Dunbar number.
Yeah, exactly that. Or you learn to do that bit yourself. I know that doesn't solve the problem for everything, but have you considered fitting them yourself?
I did. Like, actually, it was the first thing I was doing, like looking into all the parts and how to put them together. So it's a good thing because I now know exactly what I want and how to communicate to the other person. Like, okay, I'm expecting 24 volts, this and this many kilowatts, that potency and everything. So the reason I'm not doing it myself yet is because in Europe, we have the subsidy to, if you want to have your solar panels installed, you can get like up to 35 or 50% even, I think.
Yeah.
And I know, like, yes, it's depending on the state and giving away money, but it's out there. I think not using it would be the wrong decision. So I would like to save some money on that, but they require you to have an official quote by a professional. So if I can save a few €1,000s by just hiring somebody, then this is the first thing I would like to try. If I really cannot find, because this is currently a huge problem. I think because of the energy crisis that's happening, many people want to go solar now. So I'm in contact with one company, and they're telling me that they are overrun by people asking for having the solar panels installed.
In these sort of situations, it seems to make sense that you would pay in fiat and take advantage other than the supply chain issues. But the way I'd look at that is, yes, we want to run as much as we can through other plebs and on Bitcoin, but I would look at that as effectively stacking, because you're not spending your Bitcoin, you're spending your dirty fiat, and you're getting a subsidy, which, yes, okay, maybe it's stupid, these subsidies in a lot of ways, but you might as well take advantage of it and allow yourself more money to hold more Bitcoin. And long term, that's probably going to be a better decision. So, maybe it's just like 50, 60, 70% of the stuff you can have done by other plebs and done on Bitcoin. But the things that make sense to pay for in fiat, look at it as a stack.
Yeah, it's exactly how I see it. Like, this is so frustrating, like having this fiat money saved just to be ready to pay the professional for installing it, and of course the material. And I cannot allocate it to Bitcoin because we need to have the safe buffer for whatever comes with the house. I mean, if somebody is listening and thinking about buying land, okay, maybe now the situation is different. Like Bitcoin is worth a lot. Maybe you have stacked instead of buying the land. But I would say I made the mistake of acquiring the land when Bitcoin was at 3,000 euros, like, after the big crash. Not the one in March last year, but the one in 2018. That's when I got the land. And thinking about this, like, if I had stacked Bitcoin instead of buying the land, maybe I would have been better off by now.
Yeah, but the opportunity happened at that moment.
It did. I'm not regretting it that much. And to be honest, like, I don't think I would have stacked this much money in Bitcoin right away. I was not that convinced back then.
Well, the one thing that's true about what you say is that you always need a buffer with the house, with the land. There's so many unknowns that happen. I mean, look, within the few years I'm here, apart from the tree that fell on my face, we had a tree that fell on the house as well. And this is the kind of things that you cannot prepare for. I mean, you can you can imagine that some of these things may happen, but you always think it will never, and sure enough, it end up you end up having a lot of surprises, and always, if you keep everything in Bitcoin and you have to take it out, it's really painful. So you always need some kind of fiat buffer still.
Yeah, you've got to have something on the side. Yeah. Although I hear, Dim, you're responsible for this latest bull run. Apparently you scared a bear away quite recently and that kicked it all off. Is that true?
Yeah, sorry, I won't do it again, guys. once was enough.
What's the story there then?
No, I thought you were joking, man.
I heard a bear came onto your land. Is that right?
Oh, we had many. Yeah, we have many bears. We have within last year we had like maybe 3 or 4 separate visits. One of them was a whole family of
wow,
a mother and 4 teenagers. And part of the land around the house is a fenced-in area for the dogs. I have 3 dogs, and at night, we still like to have them out without having to worry that they run away. So it's great to have that fenced-in area. But I was in my office one morning, and I see from the windows that fenced-in area, and there is this family of bears that just go around the fenced-in area, and they stop in front of my window. And one of them turns around and starts sniffing and puts his 2 front paws on the top of the fence and starts climbing it.
Oh my God. Man.
And so, very curious bear. But the mother just turned around and kind of tapped him on the shoulder. I don't know. And basically she growled at him and he came back and they left. But, so this is the kind of story. My wife, she was walking down the driveway with Bowie, my dog, and she was on her phone, just not looking, not paying attention. And she stops typing on the phone. And suddenly she lifts her head, and sure enough, a bear on the driveway in front of her, maybe like, maybe 10 meters from her. And Bowie, my dog, who is supposed to be a watchdog, just, stared at the dog, just very casually, not even bark, nothing. And so she was very careful to just slowly but surely leave and go back to the house. And the bear just minded his own business and kept going. We only have black bears here, so it's not that dangerous. That if it was grizzlies, we would be a little bit more worried. But the black bears are friendly creatures, except a mother that will always defend their cubs for sure. But otherwise, I'm more worried what we have that is more dangerous. We have bobcats; they are very aggressive creatures. We have pumas, although I've never really seen one near the house. And the most scary, we have coyotes, but the one animal that apparently I have to be very worried about that we keep hearing at night that sounds like somebody's getting strangled, it's fisher cat. Have you ever heard of that, fisher cat?
No, I've never heard of one.
Me neither until last year when
they look cute.
They are apparently very fierce creatures, kind of like honey badgers, interestingly enough. And they don't care, and they're going to attack everything that they have in sight. So we have those guys, but apart from that, we just have a lot of lovely creatures around.
That's incredible to be surrounded with those sort of creatures. What a privilege to see a family of bears come through on your property. That must have been incredible.
Yeah. Those kind of bears I can deal with.
I love being in nature. Like, it completely changes my mood when I see animals and when I'm close to them. It just makes me feel maybe I wouldn't be so relaxed with a bear right in front of me, but just to be surrounded and generally be around different creatures and be in nature completely changes my outlook on life. I hate being in the city. It changes the way that I live my life. I think I would love to be seeing the things that you're seeing.
Well, what you did? Are you planning to go back to to a more rural area, or you have to stay in the city for now?
Yeah, I will be at some point. It's just not possible for me right now. The plan is to buy some land, but I want a fairly decent sized bit of land. So I sold my house about, when was it? I think it was in like June. In that sort of in that dip, I stacked hard, and I'm just waiting now for the right opportunity to buy the right bit of land. But the problem I have is partly what you and Chino have just said about opportunity cost of buying something where I'd have to be 100% sure that it's the right place. I almost pulled the trigger on buying something instead of stacking, but with everything that's been going on with Corona and the way that the government's behaving, I am sort of loosely considering speaking to Katie the Russian or someone like that and potentially just getting the fuck out of the country. But I haven't made my decision yet. So I need to be sure where I want to live because I don't want to do it twice. I know how much incredibly hard work it's going to be to set something up. So I don't want to do it twice.
Yeah, it's hard to move, really hard.
You know, there might be the compromise. Maybe you can settle for Isle of Man. I remember Ben was talking to us about that he might consider it there, and it's very close to you. So.
It is. A few people have been shilling. There's so many British Bitcoiners that are moving there, and there's a lot going for it. Like, it's smaller government. There's no speed limits at all. They do the Isle of Man TT there. It's not that far away. It's really good for taxes and stuff like that. My only thing is, like, it's quite cold, and I'd love to be somewhere warm. So I do have this kind of dream of being able to grow my fruits and bits and pieces and sit outside in the sunshine in the morning, which I wouldn't be doing there. So I'm not 100% sold yet, but it's definitely an option.
Well, just sit in the middle of your mining rig. You will always be hot.
That's a good point, actually. Have a little light and just sit there in the heat, a little deck chair and a cocktail.
That's the one thing I always wanted to, I started giving some thoughts about it, but didn't really pursue that because I don't really mine anything here. But recycling the heat from mining is really a fascinating topic. There's so much that can be done, and talking about energy efficiency and how we can reuse that energy is very interesting.
If you're somewhere cold, then definitely it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I mean, especially if you can pick up the rigs at a decent cost, and if your electricity costs aren't ridiculous. What are they like where you are? Have you got really high energy costs, or are they pretty cheap?
No, I mean, it's decent. I mean, I'm in the US, so it's not somewhere. I'm not in an area where mining really makes sense at those levels. But there is, for instance, like looking at mushrooms and the sterilizing process. I've seen those autoclaves that are actually operating on different kinds of energies, on recyclable energies. Why not try to convert that energy into something where you need to produce heat for something else? I'm not sure really to what extent you can do it efficiently and at what scale, but there is definitely a study to be done on that regard. In many ways, there needs to be a loop that completes the use of whatever you do with Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. That's where, as a Bitcoiner, you're satisfied, right? You don't waste, and you make good use of everything you do. So same with permaculture. So how can this be applied to other processes like mining? I don't know, man.
Or vertical farming, or pumping heat into greenhouses, or there's so much that can be done with it. I find with a lot of this stuff, though, it's like there's not anything that you can just get off the shelf. Like, you'd have to create something yourself, put a lot of thought and time into it, and retrofitting probably wouldn't be an option. But if you're building somewhere and you've got the time and the resources to think about, well, how am I going to heat my water systems? How am I going to heat the air? What am I going to do with heating greenhouses and stuff like that? If you're doing it from scratch, it would make a lot of sense, maybe rather than fitting in boilers and heating systems and stuff like that. Even if your energy costs aren't really, really cheap, like even if they're semi-reasonable, it would make a lot of sense. And you've got your KYC-free Bitcoin, which has more value than it would otherwise. So it's definitely something I'd like to explore. But the issue we have here in the UK, it's cold a lot of the time, but the energy costs are absolutely ridiculous. So they'll be like double or triple probably what you'll be paying in the United States. Like if it's anywhere between 4 to 12 or 15 cents in the United States, we're paying probably 18p. So whatever that is, 25 cents. It's a lot.
Yeah, it has to make sense for you wherever you are, for sure. But all of this also is bound to change because of the way, if Bitcoin becomes really Bitcoin, the hyper Bitcoinized world, the energy sector will adapt to accommodate for mining and Bitcoin. So all of these costs will probably change over time, and we won't be as subject to the price of energy where we live, because first of all, I think we will be able to be much more mobile in the way we mine. We might not be able to be as dependent of the location itself, but dependent of the group in the area, because there might be also more collectivities in terms of, right now it's only happening in the metaverse, but it could also happen physically where groups of people are coming together in the same area to actually mine together at a more cost-effective setup. So I don't know, there might be a lot of solutions over time where, regardless of where you are, you will be able to mine efficiently. I don't know. But for now, yes, it seems like we are bound to the rules and the cost of our respective areas.
Definitely. Well, I'm sure someone who's listening to this will reach out with some sort of clever designs. And if anyone's been thinking about this, please either join the Meshtadel group or send something to any of us three who are on here. And I look forward to eventually getting my land and joining the big boys table and learning and doing what you guys are doing. It's been fascinating to learn a little bit more. And I really appreciate you guys joining me. If there's not anything else you wanted to particularly cover that we haven't, then I think it's probably a good place to wrap it up. But Dim, anytime you want to join in the Meshtadel conversations, just open invite. It's always a pleasure speaking to you.
It was a pleasure, guys. Thank you so much, Max, for having me. Every time it's fun. I hope we do that again. And Czino, it's cool because it was the first time we actually get to do this live, right?
Yes, it's so weird. Like we know each other for more than a year, but I think it's the first time we actually spoke to each other. So appreciate the opportunity finally.
Well, take care. Have a good day. Watch those bears, and we'll speak soon.
All right. Bye.
Take care.